there is an assumption baked into the way televisions are sold in this country. It goes like this: the more you spend, the better the picture. Walk into Best Buy, and every display is arranged to reinforce that belief. The cheap TVs are on the left, the expensive ones glow on the right. And somewhere in the middle, a salesperson is waiting to walk you toward the right. That assumption just got a problem. Because in 2025, professional reviewers, people who measure televisions for a living, put a $799 mini LED television next to a $2,000 old and found something that genuinely surprised them. In certain conditions, the cheaper television produced a more impactful picture. Not a comparable picture. Not an almost as good picture. A more impactful one. I want to walk you through exactly what the evidence shows, where the cheaper TV wins, and where the expensive one still earns its price. Because the answer is not one size fits all, and the right television for you depends entirely on one question that I am going to ask you in about 60 seconds. But first, subscribe. Because next week I am covering the TV brands that consistently score lowest in owner satisfaction surveys, and one of them is sitting on the shelf at Walmart and Costco right now. You will want to know that before your next purchase. Now, here's the question I promised you. Think about the room where your television lives. When you watch at night, do you turn the lights down or do you leave them on? And during the day, does sunlight come through the windows near your TV? Drop your answer in the comments below, bright room or dark room. Because that one answer, more than your budget, more than the brand name, is the single most important factor in this decision. I will explain exactly why in a moment. Let me set the scene for what reviewers actually tested. The television generating the most conversation right now is the TCL QM7K. 65-inch model, around $799. It uses mini LED technology, which means thousands of tiny LED lights behind the screen, organized into 2,500 individual dimming zones that can brighten or darken independently, depending on what is happening in the picture. TCL rates the QM7K's peak brightness at 3,000 nits. The television it is being compared against is the LG C5 OLED. Also 65 inches, around $1,399. And at the top of the comparison, reviewers put the Sony A95L QD OLED, a reference-grade television that runs over $2,000. Now here is where it gets interesting. The LG C5 OLED peaks at approximately 180 nits of brightness. The Sony A95L peaks at roughly 1,000 nits. The TCL QM7K at $799 peaks at 3,000 nits. In independent testing, TechRadar measured it at 1,790 nits in real-world conditions, still comfortably higher than either OLED. That gap is not a rounding error. That is a fundamentally different category of brightness. Here is why that matters. Think about what your living room actually looks like during a football game on a Sunday afternoon. Sunlight through the windows, ceiling lights on, maybe a lamp in the corner. Your television is competing with all of that ambient light just to show you a picture. In those conditions, reviewers found the TCL QM7K pulls away from both OLEDs decisively. The brighter the highlights, the more the $799 television produces what one reviewer called genuine wow moments, where bright objects and HDR content appear to pop off the screen in a way that the more expensive panels simply cannot match when competing with room light. Tom's Guide, after extended testing, called the QM7K the TV they recommended more often to friends and family than any other model in 2025. Their reviewer noted it is bright enough to hold up in daytime viewing in ways that make everything from baseball to documentaries look genuinely impressive. TechRadar put it plainly, over 3,000 nits peak brightness, bold and vivid colors, effective local dimming that produces deep blacks for an LCD television. They put it on their best TVs list. The salesperson at the store will never walk you to the $799 television and show you this. They have no commission incentive to do that. And the store is not arranged to encourage that comparison. But the lab data is public. and the lab data tells a specific story. Before I get to where the old fights back, let me explain one more thing the data confirmed, because this is the part that surprised reviewers most. The assumption in the premium TV industry has always been that brightness comes at a cost. That to get genuinely cinematic HDR performance, you needed to spend at the top of the market. Sony, LG flagship, Samsung S-series. That is where the brightness lived, and that is where you had to go to get it. What happened in 2025 is that TCL moved the ceiling. The QM7K, at $799, produces peak brightness figures that were reserved for $2,000 televisions as recently as 3 years ago. A reviewer at TechRadar who has been testing televisions professionally for over a decade described the price-to-performance ratio as staggeringly low for what the TV delivers. Tom's Guide called it the best-looking mini LED under $1,000 and recommended it more than any other model they tested that year. The Hisense U8QG, also worth noting if you land somewhere in between, comes in around $899 and hits approximately 3,000 nits of its own. It supports Dolby Vision, runs at 144 Hz, and gives the QM7K a genuine run for its money at $100 more. If the QM7K is sold out, or you want a second opinion at that price tier, the Hisense deserves a serious look. Lab measurements have consistently confirmed both televisions in that same bracket of performance. The point is this: the gap between budget mini LED and premium OLED has closed faster than anyone in the industry predicted. That is not my opinion. That is the finding from independent testing labs and professional reviewers who have no stake in which television you buy. Now here is where I have to be honest with you, because this is not a story where the cheap TV wins everything. The LG C5 OLED wins in one area, and it is not a small area. It is the fundamental thing that OLED technology does that no backlit television can replicate. Perfect black levels. Here is the simplest way to understand the difference. The TCL QM7K has 2,500 dimming zones. That means the backlight behind the screen can dim itself in 2,500 separate areas. That is genuinely impressive engineering. But the backlight can never fully turn off while the TV is displaying a picture. There is always some light behind the panel. An OLED works differently. Each individual pixel generates its own light. When a pixel needs to display black, it turns off completely. No backlight, no bleed. True black. What this produces in a dark room is contrast that no mini LED television at any price can match. Reviewers consistently noted that watching dark films, anything with significant shadow detail, dramatic night scenes, space sequences, the LG C5 creates a sense of depth that the TCL cannot replicate. The difference is not subtle when the lights are off. RTings, which runs some of the most rigorous television measurements in the industry, was direct. The LG C5 looks considerably better in a dark room, delivering deeper blacks and no haloing around bright areas. Haloing, also called blooming, is the other honest limitation of mini LED technology. When a bright object appears against a dark background, the dimming zones around it have to compensate. Done well, as TCL has done with the QM7K, it is minimal. But in challenging scenes, white subtitles on a black screen, a campfire against a night sky, a careful eye will notice it. On an OLED, it does not exist. So let me give you the complete picture of what the evidence shows, in plain language. Bright room, lights on, daytime viewing, the TCL QM7K at $799 wins. It is brighter than the LG C5. It is brighter than the Sony A95L. HDR content looks more dramatic. Sports look more vivid. The picture has more impact against ambient light. You get a more impressive viewing experience for $600 less. Dark room, lights off, movie watching, the LG C5 OLED wins. Perfect blacks, infinite contrast, no blooming, superior shadow detail. If you have a dedicated viewing space where you control the lighting, the OLED produces a picture that is genuinely in a different class for cinematic content. The Sony A95L at over $2,000 is reference grade in a dark room. The best of both technologies, QD OLED, colors that are measurably more accurate than either competitor. But in a bright room, it still cannot match the TCL's raw brightness. You are paying a premium for darkroom precision, not bright room performance. Now I want to bring this back to the question I asked at the start. Most Americans watch television with some level of ambient light. The average household is not a darkened home theater. It is a living room with a window, an overhead light, and a television on during the news or a game. If that describes your home, the evidence consistently shows the $799 TCL QM7K will produce a more satisfying picture for your real-world viewing habits than a television costing twice as much. If you are a dedicated movie watcher who dims the room, controls the lighting, and treats evening viewing as an intentional experience, the LG C5 at $1,399 is worth the premium. The darkroom performance is not incremental. It is a different category of visual experience. Neither answer is wrong, but the industry spends a great deal of energy making sure you never ask the question clearly. Because the moment you ask which is actually better for how I watch TV instead of which is the most expensive one I can afford, the conversation changes entirely. The links to both televisions are in the description. The QM7K at $799 and the LG C5 at $199. Verify current pricing before you buy, these numbers move. And leave your answer in the comments, bright room or dark room. I read every one. Subscribe because next week I am covering the TV brands that consistently score lowest in owner satisfaction surveys. And one of them is sitting on the shelf at Walmart and Costco right now.